Hello and welcome to another episode of Brothers Creed Podcast, where we talk about motivation, experiences, and exploring the world around us. We're the Thomas Brothers. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Jared, and today we have an episode where we're talking about Freemasonry. We have a cousin, whose name is Bryce Wade. He's been in the Masons since 2006, the Freemasons. He's been a Master Mason. He has achieved the rank of Master Mason within the Masons. And we talk about how to get in, what it's like, what they do, what the lodges are about, and what are some of the things that you learn. And he really dives into all the stuff that he's gone through with the Masons and kind of how it's affected his life as well. And so it's an interesting conversation. We don't dive too deep into the details, but he gives us a good overview of Freemasonry. He's also, he's been in the Army for 13 years. He's a major in the Army. And so he's a great guy. We're thankful to have him on, and so let's go ahead and dive into this conversation.
All right, let's do it.
Spartans! What is your profession?
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills that make me a nightmare.
If I can change, and you can change, everybody can change!
Let us all unite! Let us fight for a new world, a decent world.
All right, today we have a special guest with us, Bryce Wade. Thank you, Bryce, for coming on the podcast today with us.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem. So Bryce is actually our cousin. So we've known each other for a couple years. And
Our eldest cousin. That's true.
Yeah.
So Bryce has been in the military, in the Army for 13 years. He's a major in the Army. He's also a Master Mason. He's been a Mason since 2006. And today we're going to kind of dive into different aspects of your life, Bryce. You're a really interesting guy. Every time we get together, we've always got stories and interesting conversations. So we thought we'd have you on and have a good talk.
Yeah, thanks for jumping on. I appreciate your willingness to speak with us about the Masons and etc.
All right.
So I guess one of the first things we want to talk about is specifically, the Masons. As you know, I guess the audience probably doesn't know, but as we know, our grandpa is a Mason, and I'm sure that was majorly influential on you, and one of the reasons why you decided to jump in. And so that's something that I've thought about quite a bit and done some research on. But want to hear how you got started, or what kind of got you interested in the Masons, and what that process was like to get onboarded.
Okay, so of course, Grandpa Hardy was a big influence in this. Growing up, he was always taking me to look at the lodges when they weren't in communication, those types of things, and introducing me to it. When I became an age to where I could petition a lodge, I started doing a little research because I didn't want to join something that I wasn't comfortable with, that I didn't understand what I was doing. So I did a lot of research, and not so much research to prove it false or to prove it bad, but research to understand where they were coming from. And a lot of it was to do with who has been a Mason. Because really, when you're looking at joining an organization, you want to know who those people are that are representatives of that organization. And so that was a big point in my life, was looking at those founding fathers who were Masons, looking at those influential people in history that were Masons, and the good men who have done good things in the world. So that was a big influence, and really going back to also as we are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, those early members of the church that were Masons that made a big influence and impact in the church. So those are really big things that contributed to my interest.
I was going to say, can you share maybe some of those founding fathers that were Masons? That maybe some of your favorite ones.
So George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, John Hancock are the big ones that of course, signers of the Declaration of Independence. In fact, where I live here in Virginia, in Fredericksburg, about 5 miles from my house, is where George Washington was raised as a Master Mason in Fredericksburg Lodge. So, yeah, those were some big influences right there.
Yeah, those are some, especially as an American, we revere these guys, and they put their lives and their sacred honor at risk for our country, and
that's exactly right.
We appreciate that so much, and so to look up to them I think I look up to them in many ways, and so I can see how that would be a great reason to be interested in this type of thing.
14 of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were Masons. Most of the Sons of Liberty that participated in the Boston Tea Party were Masons. In fact, they met at the tavern where the lodge met to organize the Boston Tea Party. So those types of things were very influential.
So why do you think that is? Why were all these guys, why is it that, was it these guys were just ones to be involved in this type of stuff, or was it just the upper echelon of folks were Masons? Or why is it that these key Masons were involved with this revolution of our country?
Freemasonry teaches us to be good citizens, but it also has a tradition of being a free and independent people. So if you look back to history, we get our name Freemasons from the Dark Ages. These were the apprentices and skilled craftsmen that were allowed to roam throughout Europe that weren't held to the land. They weren't owned by anybody, and they could work for whoever they wanted to work for. So they would go from kingdom to kingdom or lordship to lordship, and they would build these cathedrals and castles and whatever. And so they were free people. So they were paid accordingly.
So it's not strictly like an American thing. I mean, it goes, a lot of these American maybe historical patriots were members or were Freemasons, but is it something is it a worldwide organization?
It is. It's a worldwide organization, but mainly originating in Europe, and then really the modern Freemasonry as we know it coming out of England in the 1600s, and then coming over to the New World. Which
makes sense as we did, as Americans did to start off with, coming from that area, that it would be part of our culture.
Right.
Yeah. I was recently walking around downtown Charleston, and I saw a plaque just on the side of the road, and it said, this place was the initiation of the Scottish Rite, back in like the 1700s or something. And it's like, oh, I didn't know that. From what the plaque read, it made it seem like this is where the Scottish Rite actually started, was at this point in Charleston, which is a pretty cool history. Obviously, it's one.
So the Scottish Rite and the York Rite, I am not in the Scottish Rite or the York Rite.
Okay.
I have not gone and done the necessary steps to become a part of those.
Okay.
But they are more modern degrees that have been appendages of the three basic degrees that make a Mason. I am just as much a Mason as a 32nd Scottish Rite Mason.
Okay.
So they're just additional degrees.
So maybe let's talk about that since you brought that up. What are those three basic positions you talked about?
So you have what's called an entered apprentice. Basically, you have petitioned the lodge. The lodge has accepted you. So one interesting term in history, I know y'all have heard the term blackballed. You've been blackballed. So that comes from the lodge. So in the lodge, we vote, and we have a system where we drop either a black ball or a white square into the ballot box. So when somebody petitions the lodge, if you receive one black ball, you can't join. So that's the term, you've been blackballed. But anyway, so the entered apprentice is the first degree where you learn the basics. Then you are advanced to the fellowcraft degree after you've proven proficient in the entered apprentice. So remember, most all of the degrees in Masonry are memorized. They're not written down. They're from mouth to ear and ear to mouth. So these things have been passed down for hundreds of years. And you could really say a lot of it's been passed down for thousands of years, because we trace it all the way back to the tradition traces all the way back to the building of King Solomon's temple. So after you've advanced to a fellow craft and you've proved proficient, then you are raised as a Master Mason, which is the 3rd degree. That's the degree George Washington held. That's the degree Benjamin Franklin held. Most Masons, what they call Blue Lodge Masons, are the third degree.
So then it sounds like, I mean, that seems pretty simple. Just the 3 different steps. But from my understanding, there's lots of different complexity around other avenues or other types of branches into Masonry. You can go off into the Shriners, which is like the little red hats that people may know from the movies.
They're actually an appendage of the Scottish Rite. So in order to be a Shriner, you have to be a Scottish Rite.
Okay.
Mason. Grandpa is in the York Rite. So there's the Grotto. There's all kinds of different auxiliaries and appendages to those rites.
And I guess for the layman listening to it, those are just, like we talked about, the Shriners or whatever else. That's just groups of people that meet together. I mean, obviously they have a common goal,
they have
but
a common purpose.
Yeah, I mean,
like the Shriners, they have the children's hospitals, those types of charitable things they do. Each organization has their own focus on. So whatever you feel passionate about, you go find that organization within Masonry, and that's where you tend to end up and spend most of your time and money.
Is there a certain, and maybe you kind of having a military background as well, is there a certain camaraderie that comes with becoming a Mason, and maybe within your own lodge, but maybe even just like a greater camaraderie with other people? I mean, there's probably thousands of lodges around the United States and even greater the world. How is that? How is the camaraderie?
So whenever I meet a brother Mason, whether it be in the lodge or outside of the lodge, there's an instant connection there. I know what he's pledged or obligated, what oath he's taken. I know what standards he is living by or should be living by as being a Mason. So there's already a connection there. I know that I could ask him, because in Masonry we give an oath to support other brother Masons in their worthy endeavors. And so I know if I need his help, he'll be there for me, and vice versa. He knows he can call on me if he needs help. And we're obligated to assist them as long as it doesn't financially burden my family, right? So, yes, there is a camaraderie there. And the sad part about it is that Freemasonry is one of the organizations that is suffering right now because many people don't value anything other than themselves. We see a lot of churches declining, civic organizations, and Freemasonry is it's the oldest fraternal organization in the world, and it's dying because none of the young people are interested. And you have to remember that back in the old times, men were involved in their church and in Masonry, and that was their social gatherings. That was what they did. They didn't watch TV at home every night. They went to lodge meeting, and that's how they networked. That's how they build relationships in the community is at the lodge.
Are lodges typically involved in the community? Like you said, the Shriners have the children hospitals and everything like that. Or are Masonic lodges usually kind kind of well known and supporting the community, or what are some different things that they do?
They are. Back when the Grand Lodges of the states were wealthy because they had a lot of members. Most of the states ran orphanages. Many of those orphanages have closed over the years. But the Masons still do a lot of worthy things. A lot of the lodges have become involved in the dyslexia, I don't know what you would call it, like schooling, where like a lot of the lodges will hold dyslexia classes and stuff and buy the materials for it and that types of things. So they look for opportunities to serve in the community. And it's supposed to, the one good thing about the lodge is it builds good members of the community that are supposed to be involved in those public offices that'll make a difference, right? But we're not seeing as much now as we used to.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been a big decline in a lot of those things, a lot of those kinds of things. Younger generation, whether you say that, I can see that in some sense, yeah, that maybe people are more selfish, but I think in other sense, people are kind of want to back off of the institutions that they might feel like are telling them what to do. I think there's a variety of factors at play, but one of the questions I had for you is I know that you have to petition to be a Mason, and that they have to decide whether or not to let you in or not. How does that work? How does that process work? Do they come to you, or do you just go up to any old Mason in the community and say, hey, I want to be a Mason, and then they interview you? I know there's an interview process, yeah.
Yeah, so as a Mason, I cannot ask you to be a Mason. I can't ask you to join the lodge. I can invite you to come to lodge functions, but I cannot specifically come out and say, will you join the lodge? That's against my oath. So you have to ask me to join the lodge. Then I give you a petition. There are things that you have to believe. So you have to believe in the immortality of the soul, the resurrection. And you have to believe that there is a supreme being. And you state that you believe those things on the petition. The petition goes before the lodge. They form a committee. The committee then goes and investigates your character and the community. And then they will, if you're married, they'll talk it over with your wife, and they'll come meet with you. And then the committee will come back to the lodge with their findings of the investigation, and then they'll vote. And if the vote is affirmative, then you will be set up for the first degree.
Very good. How many people?
There's got to be somebody in the lodge that knows you.
Okay. How many? What if you know somebody in a different lodge? Can you petition for someone from a different lodge? Like, for example, let's just in this.
Yeah.
Like, give an example. Like, I don't
absolutely
know anybody in this area who's a Mason. Let's say I really want to join the Masons, and I go talk to you and say, "Hey, can I join the Masons?" Would that be sufficient for me asking you, or do I have to ask somebody here in this area?
Well, so what could happen is you could ask me, and then I could find out what lodge is in your area and contact the secretary of that lodge and say, hey, family member of mine wants to join the lodge. He lives in your area. Would you petition him? And then we'd go from there.
I would suspect that maybe, people in the lodge, there's probably some people that would say, yeah, give me his name. I'll give him a call and we'll go out to lunch or something like that, and just kind of form some sort of relationship, because Absolutely. I would suspect that the lodges, want new members. And so they would pursue someone that shows any kind of interest, almost like a lead, that they would say, yeah, let's go talk about it. Or they wouldn't say, have him come down or whatever else.
Right. Yeah. And, the lodge is there to make good men better. That's our whole purpose. We're not there to take your religious beliefs away from you. we're there to add upon the light and knowledge that has been garnered through Freemasonry over the thousands of years, and to make you a good, make you a better man than you currently are through the symbolism and rites in Freemasonry. Because the Masons are encouraged to attend their churches regularly, or whatever forms of worship that they are involved in. So it's not meant to take the place of your religious worship.
Yeah, I like that. That kind of leads in one of the questions that I had. I understand that Masons, in regards to, religious belief, I mean, they are very interested in expanding that knowledge, reading some of the different apocrypha or some of the different scriptures that are out there, and just trying to expand their understanding of God and the nature of God. One of my questions for you is kind of what you mentioned just a minute ago about how Masons has made you a better man and bringing light and knowledge into your life. Can you maybe give one or two examples of how you feel like you've grown or benefited as a man from some of the things that you've learned in Masonry, but you feel like you maybe wouldn't have gotten somewhere else?
Yeah, so a lot of the relationships or men that I have met in Freemasonry has given me good examples of people to pattern my life after. I'm not as active as I used to be. That's because of life right now is pretty hectic in my vocation. But years ago, I was really active, and there were really good men that I learned a lot from. I mean, there was men in their 80s, early 90s that had memories like you wouldn't believe. I mean, because they had been doing this for so many years, and this is a lot to the degrees are a lot to remember, and it has to be word perfect, so they could talk for, they could just spout off the degrees without missing a beat. And I can't remember what I did yesterday, so I could see where Masonry kept their minds young, because it kept them always exercising their intellect and being able to remember all those things. And then just the symbolism of Masonry helps you remember. Like if you take some of the symbols, the compass is supposed to teach us self-constraint. We're supposed to circumscribe our actions, and so it's supposed to keep us in self-control. Basically, is what it teaches us. You look at the level; it teaches us that we are equal with our brother Masons, no matter what your status is in life, your vocation, how much money you have. In the lodge, you're all equal. And you all are on the level. And the square teaches us to square our actions with all mankind. So those types of things, I look at those symbols, and they remind me of what they stand for in Masonry.
That's great. I love that. Thank you for taking us through those symbols that many probably know well. If you just go walk around DC or look at a map, you can see a lot of those symbols baked into the DC exactly roads.
Right. So, would you say? I know you said that. Let's give an example of your lodge. You said that obviously with kids and vocation and life and everything else, there's a time and a place for many things, or time and a season, I'll say. But whenever you go to lodge meetings, are they more, let's say business related or lodge business related, or are they more to go and to, I don't want to say hang out, but to communicate and to talk and to conversate with people? What does that typically look like?
So typically on a regular lodge night, usually most lodges have what they call communication, which is when they meet, and it's usually once or twice a month. You go to the lodge, they will open lodge, they will conduct business. They usually have some sort of little presentation about masonry that one of the masons will give, or they'll give a class on some form or some part of masonry. And that usually takes 45 minutes to an hour for lodge meeting. Once lodge business is closed, most lodges have refreshments afterwards, whether it be a meal or light refreshments or whatever. And most of the men, they stay around and they talk for an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. So usually when you go to lodge meeting, you can plan on being there for about 2 hours. And it's a good time.
Are you on the younger side of the members of your lodge?
I'm kind of in the middle now. I just hit 40, so.
So there are some guys that are younger?
Yeah, there are actually a few guys that are younger. I joined when I was 25. That's when I joined the lodge.
Are the lodges geographically, you're assigned to one in a certain geography, or can you choose to go to whichever one around town you want to go to?
No, you can choose whichever one you want.
It's just how far do you want to drive?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And lodges are differ. So some lodges, like if you go up here to Arlington, Virginia, their lodge is more formal when they meet. So they dress up, at least white shirt and tie, or some sort of, suit and tie. Mm-hmm. Some of them dress up in, bow tie. And then you can go to Old Country Lodge where they're wearing overalls and flannel shirt.
Yeah.
So it just depends on what you want, what you're comfortable with.
Interesting. Yeah, I went to, when I was living in Salt Lake City, I went to there's a big lodge up on the hill there in Salt Lake City that looks like a Capitol building. It looks like a giant government building. It's got these giant, columns out front, and they had like an open day or whatever.
Yeah, I've been there. Grandpa took me there when I was about 13.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah, I went in there, and it was kind of an open day. There was a bunch of Masons that were in there. You could come and chat with folks. So I went, and they had different rooms where different lodges would come meet. I mean, it wasn't just one building for one lodge. It was like multiple different lodges would come and meet. They have their different ceremony rooms and stuff, and they walked us through and gave us a tour, and I was able to chat with some of the guys there. It was very interesting and very beautiful building as well.
Brigham Young actually wanted to charter a lodge in Utah when they left and went to Utah, and they couldn't get a charter from the Grand Lodge of England, and none of the states would give them a charter, so he ended up not pursuing it. But yeah, if you look at any photograph of Brigham Young, he will always have a square and compass somewhere on his lapel tie somewhere.
Interesting.
Visible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. How many guys typically is it just depend on the lodge? How many guys show up? Or, I mean, is this like we're talking like 20 to 30 guys, or talking like maybe 10, 15?
Well, it depends on the lodge. Some lodges are struggling to stay open, so they need, a lot of times they have just enough to form a quorum to open the lodge, which is, I'm trying to remember, I think it's seven men. And I may be wrong, plus or minus one or two, but some of them are struggling. Some lodges will have 50. You just never know. The lodge that Grandpa used to go to in Bossier City is doing pretty well. They have lots of members, and their lodge is booming. So, would
you attribute that to there being a military base close by? I mean, is there, not that it's I mean, one for one, obviously, but do you see where there's an increase in military members, or maybe not specifically officers, but that there's an increase in lodge members as well?
I think a lot of the ones in Bossier City, a lot of them I think are law enforcement, but there's probably a good portion of them that are military. The Masonry isn't as affluent in the military as it used to be. It was pretty big in the military. But now it's not you don't see as many anymore.
I remember Grandpa telling some stories about when he was deployed overseas and was looking for housing and ended up, connecting with some, couldn't find any housing, and they said, no, there's no way you can stay at this place, but then ended up hooking up with a guy that was a Mason, and he said, yeah, I'll help take care of you. I'll take care of your family. Be at this place at this time, and we'll get you in. And it was kind of like that thing that you said, that as long as you help a brother out, as long as it's not going to be super financially draining or whatever else. And I've always kind of admired that even potentially across the world you could find somebody that will lend a helping hand, or that you could be that helping hand for somebody.
That's exactly right. You've got a friend. I mean, there's many accounts during the war between the states where Masons on opposite sides assisted one another. There was instances where skirmishes were stopped and both sides would give Masonic rites to bury the dead.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, did you ever hear any stories about that in World War II?
I think there probably are. I haven't read a lot of that, but there probably were.
We Nathan did a an episode on World War I and in the trenches on Christmas, and how these guys were singing back and forth to each other, and in some cases they would have these unofficial ceasefires, and really they were just shooting over each other's heads the whole time anyway. And then, it was such a stalemate that literally nobody was dying on either sides because neither one of them wanted to shoot each other. And so they were almost within hearing distance. They were within hearing distance of each other, so they were talking all the time and stuff. So
yeah,
I imagine there was, some camaraderie there also, among the Masons as well.
Yeah, probably. I would imagine so.
Yeah, I think the Masons are very interesting. One of the questions I had is that there's a lot of folks out there, that see the Masons as the Illuminati or the puppet masters of the world. There's a lot of conspiracy theories that go around that.
Secret societies.
Secret society type of a thing. As a Mason, have you ever run up against, someone who's had that kind of a mentality, and how would you respond to maybe someone who's asking these questions in a genuine manner?
Well, first off, people fear what they don't understand. And a lot of people look for anything they can to explain the circumstances they're in. And Freemasonry is one of those easy targets to pin the problem on. Mm-hmm. And it's been around for so long that it's been very influential in history. The members of Freemasonry have been very influential in history. So they look at that and they say, well, that must be some conspiracy. But that's not the case. Freemasonry does not control anything. We are a group of men who are striving to be better, and we belong to the oldest fraternal organization in the history of the world, at least that still exists today. So,
And it's open to anybody. Anybody can join. Any man can join if they want to. So, how secretive a society is it if anybody can just call up and say, hey, I'd like to join?
Right. And it's not that it's secret. It's just that we don't cast our pearls before swine, if I can put it like that. Mm-hmm. If you don't receive the tenets of Freemasonry in the manner they're supposed to be received, you will not understand. So the degrees are set up in a way that as you go through them, they build upon each other and you develop a better understanding. So if you receive those teachings in any other context, they're not going to have the same impact or make as much sense as if you receive them in the way they're intended. So we hold those things secret because they're important to us.
And maybe not so much secret, just not public.
But so if you want to join, you're more than welcome to join, and we will give you the light and knowledge.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too because with the advent of the internet, it's just kind of like you could probably find any information that you wanted to online. Not that I'm telling people to go do that, but like you said, I mean, you did your research whenever you got into it to not to prove it wrong or right or whatever else, but just to be informed. And I don't know, going into it knowing that I want to do this because I want to become a better person, I think that's extremely admirable. And I think, not the few Masons that I have known in my life, mostly family, a couple not, have been great people and have been people that I would trust and that I do respect. And so, I don't know if that counts for anything.
Not only that, but tradition. It's a tradition that's been passed down for all these hundreds of years from one man to another by word of mouth, not written down. And it's amazing to me. I feel like I'm a part of history when I go and perform degrees. I feel like I am connected to those people of long ago because I am participating in the same things that they participated in,
So would you encourage your sons to, when they become of age, to potentially pursue the path as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, it gives you a different way or a different perspective of looking at the world.
Yeah, interesting. I think there's, from what I've heard, you speak today here today, and then from my other experiences, there's a lot of camaraderie to be had within the Masons. Also, a lot of additional learnings that you might not know, and they have some different ceremonies that walk you through in a unique way, some different principles and life values that the way that they do it really instills those values in you. So I think that that's very noble, and it's pretty cool. So how often do you go? Is this like do you go like once a month? I mean, let's just say full activity as a Mason. Is this once a month or twice a month?
Once a month.
Okay.
Or whenever communication is. So if your lodge meets once a month or twice a month, it's, whenever the lodge is open.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. And then
and if you're really involved, I mean, there's leadership positions that you can advance through. All the way up in being the master of the lodge, and then also in each state there's the Grand Lodge, which governs the whole state, and so you can be the Grand Master of the state or the Grand Lodge. So there's opportunities there to be a leader as well and a teacher. So the more you learn, the more you can impart to others.
Yeah, I liked what I think there's a lot of people out there that don't, including me, right, that don't have tons of information on it or that have maybe looked into it. I think there's a lot of people out there that just have never even heard of the Masons before. And one thing that you had said is we were talking about that it's kind of I don't want to say a dying breed, but it's something that's phasing out a little bit, or it's not as popular as it once was. And what is that attributed to. And potentially people are thinking about, themselves more. I think people in general don't like responsibility. They don't like to be held accountable for things. And if you have if you're committing to do something, even if it's just once a month, or now I have to put forth extra effort to memorize these different degrees, or I have to now that if I become a Shriner, then I'm going to be having to do charity events or whatever else. It's just I think people shy away from responsibility in general, unless it's self-serving.
Yeah. It's a lot of work going through the degrees. It took me hours and hours and hours of sitting with another Mason and him, telling me the lines and me repeating them over and over again so that I could remember them, and then go and stand before the lodge and, regurgitate everything that I learned. Word perfect.
And you can't you can't write anything down. You can't go home and write anything down.
No, that's part of your oath, is you are not to reveal anything that's not written down. You are not to reveal it. So other than it being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, technically, if you went home and you had your own journal and you scratched down the things and you memorized it, and then you crinkled it up to a million pieces and then you burnt it with, into just ashes, you're not revealing it.
No, you're not supposed to write anything.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if it's even for your own use.
Even if it's destroyed afterwards.
That's exactly right. There can be no trace.
That's one thing that, one of the reasons why Jared and I did this podcast and kind of started it was because we wanted to, number one, do something. We wanted to do something personally for ourselves, but also involve other people and listeners. And we've been able to, first off, talk with lots of people and interview people and just build amazing relationships, as well as our own personal, brotherly camaraderie, family camaraderie. Right. And we've been able to research and to learn tons of amazing things. And I think that like we were talking about, people don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to work towards things. And that's something that for us personally, building that personal creed, sometimes it takes, first off, it takes time and it takes effort. It's not just gonna come. It's not just gonna happen. It's gonna, if I want to get better at this, then I gotta learn it. I got to apply it. I got to study it and make it a part of who I am. And so I kind of felt like that was, I guess, comparable to the Masons on how you're building your own personal self.
Yeah. And a lot of people now too, they don't have the integrity and the self-dignity that Masonry requires. Just as we were just talking about, writing the things that we learn in Masonry down for your own personal use. Yeah. You take an oath not to do that. Now, integrity.
Yeah.
Right. Integrity says, even when nobody's looking,
yep,
I'm going to do what I pledged.
Yep.
What I took an oath, not to do. So, I think a lot of people shy away from those things that hold them accountable, whether it be accountable to themselves or accountable to others. And a lot of Masonry is you learn these things and you are self-accountable to what you've obligated yourself to.
A question that I had, and this is kind of going back to where you were talking about whenever you're petitioning to become a member of the lodge, and the lodge kind of votes on your membership, right? And we talked about being blackballed. Mm-hmm. What would cause someone to receive a black ball in a petition? I mean, have you ever seen that, or what?
I have never seen it. I've heard about it, but I've never seen it done. They go out in the community and they talk to people. They talk to, members of your family. they go, they go and talk to people in the community. They try and find out what they can about your character. And if they find something that's out of sorts,
do they do like background check and stuff, or
somebody in the lodge knows something about you?
Yeah.
Because they don't know who submitted that blackball into the ballot box. It's all, blind ballot. So all they know is somebody in the lodge said that they knew something about your character and they didn't agree with you joining the lodge.
Or maybe they were interviewing with the wife and, they could pick up on some red flags that, maybe there was some abuse or something like that, or they could tell from the way that they treated their spouse or the way that they talked to them, and they're just like, I don't think this guy's a good fit. Maybe something like that too.
Yeah, that could be the case too. Usually when the committee comes back and they find something like that, they will let the lodge know, and then they, it's taken care of. But
yeah,
if somebody in the lodge knows something about you, they could just not like you and just blackball you.
and you can never go out again in that lodge. I mean, you can never apply again in that lodge,
no,
or
you
it's
can't
just
petition that lodge.
Interesting.
Well, there's plenty other lodges, though, I'm sure.
That's right. That's right.
That's so interesting. I feel like whenever I drive around town, or these small towns in North Carolina, South Carolina, on the way to the beach, I'm like, you always see a small nondescript building with no windows. Like, oh, that's the lodge. It's
Masonry built much of this country.
Typically they're really old buildings.
Yeah.
Not that they're not run down, but there's one like 3 minutes from our house growing up in the town of Matthews there, and I remember going there a couple times with Grandpa. He would when we drive by, he'd say, "Oh, let's stop in," or whatever, and yeah, I mean, I guess from the ones that I remember seeing and they're kind of older buildings. I don't know if they're continuing to build more, or if it's just a kind of.
Who owns the real estate to that? Is each lodge its own entity, or is it like
each lodge owns it?
Huh.
And there's different contractual agreements and things that lodges have, but yeah.
So as a member of the lodge,
go ahead. The old country lodge I was raised in was in the middle of nowhere in this little bitty town. The only thing left there really was a post office. There wasn't a stoplight, nothing. The lodge was about the only little brick building that was left in the town that was operable.
that was the lodge you wear your overalls to? That you wear your overalls to and your flannel.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep. And the lodge that was down the road from it, in the next town over, it was a wood frame building that had been there since the early 1900s. So, yeah, they come in all shapes and sizes.
So I assume with the different lodges, different real estate, some lodges are nicer than others, some are bigger, smaller. Is there like a standard fee structure or like membership dues that you mentioned earlier? You alluded to that earlier.
So each Grand Lodge or each state Grand Lodge has a fee, and then each lodge has their own fee. So they'll add those two together, and that will be your annual dues. These smaller lodges usually have less a fee than the larger lodges. So, I think I pay around $35 a year, but then there's some lodges you'll pay over $100.
Yeah.
So,
oh, that's nothing really. Over a year's time, you'll spend more on Netflix than you do your lodge membership.
So,
well, yeah, Bryce, this has been a great conversation. I think it's been very enlightening, and without getting too, I guess, nitty gritty into what it specifically is, but just an overall, just kind of overview of what the Masons are and who they are and what they do, and some of the promises and oaths that they take,
and how you get in, and some of the different what different lodges may look like. So this has been a really good overview of how it all works. one of the things here at the end, we want to ask you about your personal creed, but before we jump into that, is there anything else that you wanted to mention about the Masons, or anything we forgot to cover that you had in mind to share?
Just don't take people's word for things. Go out and do a little research. But like I say, don't research to know what the secrets are. Research to see the good in it.
Yeah.
What good could come from me being a member of the Freemasons?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people nowadays, they go into things looking for the bad. If you look for the bad, you're going to find the bad, whether it be right or wrong.
Yeah.
So just go into it looking for the best things that you can find about it. So
I think there's imperfect people everywhere, right? I mean,
that's right.
And I'm sure there's some Freemasons that haven't kept their oaths, right? I'm sure there's members of churches that haven't kept their promises, and there's members, there's nobody's perfect, right?
We're all imperfect.
Yeah, but that the few bad apples isn't what's going to spoil the good or the potential of an organization or a group of people that can do good things.
Yeah. Great. Those are great words. I appreciate that last bit at the end there. Well, let's jump into this, the question about your personal creed. So we sent you this before, but, one of the things we always ask our guests is to share a piece of their personal creed, which is a creed is a set of beliefs or principles that guide your actions. We talked about how the Masons, for you, has added a lot of those principles to your personal creed. So we were hoping that you could share with us maybe a quote or some kind of guiding principle that you go by that you could share with our audience and us, of course.
Yeah, well, so I've got a couple things. One is one of my favorite quotes is by Robert E. Lee. Do your duty in all things. And another thing that I've learned through the years is anything in life that is worth something requires the most work and sacrifice. If it doesn't require a lot from you, then it's usually not worth much. I look back on my life and the things that I've gone through, serving a 2-year mission for my church requires a lot of sacrifice, but I gain many blessings from it. Going through basic training in officer candidacy school in the Army. Officer candidacy school was probably one of the top 2 hardest things I've ever done in my life. Well worth it. The benefits that I've reaped from it, that have been tremendous. Being married is not easy. It is a constant, work, but it's well worth it. And then raising a family, having children, it's a great sacrifice. We give up a lot of things to have a family. I know a lot of people that at work that don't have families or maybe just have a spouse, and they go on vacations all the time, travel the world with all their money, do all these things. But then I look back and I say, how sad of a life is that? What are they going to have to show for the end of their life? They're going to be a lonely, miserable person when they have nobody that loves them left,
Yeah.
So family to me is the most important thing. Being able to raise my sons with the attributes and character that they need to be successful, not only in this life, but to prepare them for the life to come. I think that's probably the best advice I can give is look for the things that require the most sacrifice. And those will be the things that will be the most worthwhile.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate that. Having 4 kids myself, I was just telling Ethan how sometimes it just gets to be, you're just like, oh man, I need a break, or I need a little bit of vacation, and it's definitely a sacrifice, and I can see, that it is definitely a hard thing, and I'm in the thick of it right now, so it's it's a struggle for sure. But I agree with what you're saying totally.
Still buying diapers.
Yes.
Yeah, we're almost out of that. Hopefully we're almost out of that. Got the last one potty trained. Now we're just trying to get out of diapers for good.
There you go. Yeah, kind of what you said reminded me of something. I don't know if you know Jordan Peterson. He's kind of a professor and has a lot of clips on social media and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and,
I subscribe to his stuff on.
And he was doing an interview with a lady who was a reporter and very successful reporter, and basically she said something along the lines of, well, I've just chosen I've chosen my career, and I don't want to get married, or I don't want to have family. And I think it goes for guys and girls. It was not specific, but it was like, I chose my career over getting married and having family. And he said to her, he was like, well, probably financially you've done significantly better than even I have. And you have built an amazing career, but whenever you and you have significant amounts of money, but whenever you get to the point to where money is no longer an object for you, you're going to be 50 years old, 60 years old, sitting at home alone, or, on a beach somewhere, and you're going to be alone, and you're not going to strive for money anymore because you have it. You're going to long for companionship. You're going to long for family. You're going to long for love. And that is a legacy that if you bypass it, then it will bypass you. And it's hard to get that back.
Yeah, there's seasons in our life. And once you pass that season in your life, there's no going back to recapture it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's great.
Even with careers, I mean, there's kind of a point in your life where either you change course or you continue doing what you're doing. But once you get past a certain point, changing course is kind of not an option anymore.
Yep.
So unless you're on that work till you die program.
Which that's a bad program to be on.
Yeah.
You want to get off that program as soon as you can. Well, working until you die is different than just being mentally engaged until you die, which I think one of the great things about the Masons is it keeps you engaged in a good cause, and that's why all these guys continue to stay sharp, is because they are continually engaged. So.
Oh yeah, engaging their mind at a level that most people don't.
Yeah.
Most people just veg out and watch TV and don't really engage their mind, make it work for them.
It's interesting. As a kid, I used to be like, I could memorize things like crazy. I mean, it came so easy. I could just look at something, I could read it 2 or 3 times, and I had it memorized. But now I had to, what did I have to do? I had to do something where I had to memorize something. It was like a Christmas program where I was playing Joseph in this Christmas program, and I had to memorize like a paragraph of stuff. And I was like panicking, and I got halfway through it, and I was like, I did only have a week and a half to prepare for it, but I was like, I should have this down. It was so hard. And so it almost was, to me, it was like, man, I just want to maybe memorize a scripture every day or something like that that's going to help me to. I don't think it's like a muscle, right? It can atrophy, but I think it's something that can come back, and it's something that can keep you fresh. I mean, Grandpa's 90 years old, and he's still able to go and participate, and I mean, even at this point in his life, he has a community to interact with and everything else, which I think has attributed to his longevity for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think he's gifted with a gift, with his memory, because he can remember dates and things that I find fascinating in his life. But I think one of the things that's kept him sharp is being a part of the Freemasons. After he retired, he started going regular, and he got involved, and he stayed involved, and tried to, always hold a position in the lodge and be active and contribute.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it. He told me one time after he retired that he was busier when he retired than he was when he was working.
Well, he didn't have any kids either to be dealing with.
Yeah, well, but all the people that, one thing I can say about our grandfather, he's always serving somebody. I remember going to stand I'd go 2 or 3 weeks to stay with him in the summers, and we were always going somewhere to help somebody, do some project for somebody. He always had something going on where he was trying to help people. So
yeah,
I think that kept him young.
Definitely.
And he always got up. So one thing I noticed about Grandpa too, so this looks like we're running out of time, but this is the last thing. So one thing I noticed about him that sets him apart from a lot of other people that are his world or have retired, he gets up every morning and gets dressed and prepares for the day. And I think that has kept him young, because people that don't go to bed on time at night, they get up late, they sleep in, they don't get dressed, they just kind of linger around the house, they tend to just waste away.
Yeah. Wake up with purpose. And
even if he didn't have anything going on that day, he gets up and he gets dressed.
Yeah.
And he prepares for something comes along, he is ready.
I think that's good advice, even just for, I work from home full time. And, there's sometimes it's just you kind of roll out of bed and log on and go right to work. Or, luckily I have kids that I got to get on the bus and stuff like that, so I'm up earlier. But, it's easy to fall into that, just kind of staying up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and then sleeping until 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I think that will do a number on your health, and just not only your physical health, your mental health as well, because you just feel useless, which is just really hard.
Well, Bryce, we appreciate your time today. We want to be respectful of your time, and for our listeners out there, thanks for listening in. And if you're interested in the Masons, then hopefully the conversation with Bryce has perked your ears up to maybe go research a little bit more about them. So let's build that creed together.
All right, let's do it. Thanks, Bryce.
Thanks, Bryce.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.